the internet is such a powerful and underestimated thing. The internet's the only thing that made that happen for me, you know, it's like completely changed the trajectory of my life. And that in turn, you know, attracted a bunch of people who were already interested in consuming those ideas. You apply for a job that doesn't exist by making things that only you can make. Just do things that people can see on the internet that are reflective of how you think.
How do you even explain what you do? I know you're multifaceted. You've had an interesting career over the past couple of years and pivots along the way. So yeah, like friends and family who don't maybe understand tech, how do you explain what you do?
It's a good question. I don't, starting as a graphic designer, I think is pretty easy for people to grok, you know, people understand what the basic function of a graphic designer is, but over the course of the last probably 5 years, the amount that is still true is maybe debatable. I think it's still the core, it's kind of the core competency, or the thing that the thing that built the momentum behind everything that exists now. But this idea of being able to take ideas and communicate them concisely is the really broad definition, but graphic design is kind of the underpinning of that. I think that's where I kind of found my footing in the commercial world before I did my own thing. 10 years of like bouncing around agencies and doing all different kinds of commercial applications of design until I kind of felt like I had enough of an understanding to go out on my own.
Makes sense. Were you always super creative? Or like as a kid, growing up, did you like, drawing and all that, the typical stuff that is that?
Not really. Not really. I would not have considered myself, I maybe wouldn't have used that word. My dad's an engineer and was always like building stuff around the house. And like, I think that the thing that kind of seduced me about graphic design originally was there's like systems and rules and like designing things not in a vacuum. So I would never have considered myself an artist in my early, in my school years, like art as like this conducted class where you're like learning about art history and maybe like copying a certain artist style, or like trying to draw a still life of, an arrangement of fruit or something. That wasn't something that was like I was good at or had the aspiration to get better at even.
But were there like elements of artistic? Yeah, were there like elements of like, I don't know, if you're looking back, I guess.
I think so. I think there's like, this idea of designing systems, or like I was like huge into cars as a kid, and like, these like playing video games, designing your own like concepts for games, and just like systems were more fascinating to me, I think, than the like how they're visually represented. And what else did I get into early in my chart? Like trading Pokemon cards and playing Pogs. I don't know if you have Pogs or you're familiar.
I used to, yeah. What was your favorite Pokemon back in the day?
I have no idea, honestly. Like, even that is interesting. Like, I was more into like the meta game of this thing than the actual characters. But I loved like all those schoolyard markets. Marbles was a huge one in the UK too.
Marbles, like
Marbles, Pogs, Pokemon, and video games. I had a really good friend who was like super talented Flash developer. This was like back in, when would that have been? A long time ago. It wouldn't even be 20. It'd be like 2004, 2003, 2004. One of my good friends was like a early, like one of the few people I knew that had a like PC at the time, and would make taught himself Flash and would make these little Flash games, and spent a ton of time like messing around with computers early on. So trying to build games, trying to make media, like record these videos, like Jackass knockoff videos when we were kids, and then we like build this like marketing campaign within our school to distribute the videos and stuff. So always been like, I guess creative is such a broad term, but yeah, for sure, just always trying to like figure out these different, figure things out, but more so like when you get the itch to like start making stuff. I've had that for a long time, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably since I was not academically gifted whatsoever, and just could not hold uh my attention span was not great academically, and then
Yeah. Same
like
here.
all of these extracurricular things that now I look back on as like way more foundational to what I'm doing now than stuff I was trying to remember to pass exams, right?
That's really interesting. Like even when I went to college, I like barely made it in. I didn't have like the best grades in high school, but I did whatever I could to like, make my parents happy. And even when I went to college, like I think I graduated with like a 2.8, 2.9 GPA, which is not great. But the only thing that kind of like held me there and held my attention was all the extracurricular activities. Like I was the kid on campus that was like organizing the school concerts and like, hosting events like every single day of the week. Um, and so like I feel like depending on your personality, even if you don't have like, the mental capacity like other people do to just have they can go really hard in school, I think you can kind of figure out what it is that you're good at. But I think when you're a kid, it's really difficult to find that in yourself. So the next question I have is like, did you have entrepreneurial mentors or people growing up, or how did you kind of find your way into that path or even realize that it was possible?
It's a good question. I did not at all. So my parents were both in the military, and I studied graphic design when I got out of, mandatory schooling in the UK, and that took me a while to get into that, even into that pursuit. I worked in the Honda factory in the town I grew up in, like putting exhausts on Honda Civics for 9 hours before I went to.
Still luxurious.
Yeah. And I would come home from those shifts. I would do like night shifts at Honda. I'd come home from those shifts, and we had like a old PC that would like mess around with Photoshop on, again, like through these kids that I knew in school that introduced me to like the Adobe Creative Suite and all of those things that were like pretty nascent at the time.
This is like, so at 16, 17, or how old were you around this age?
Now I would have been. I'm actually skipping forward. So my first introduction to that stuff, I had a cousin in the UK school system. They have this thing called work experience when you're 16, and you're supposed to go and work for a week in a real work environment, and they give
They should do that everywhere.
options. It's a very good program, but the options they give you as a default are like, go work in the local supermarket, go work in the library, the bus station, whatever. And they do give you the option to organize your own experience if you want to. And I was able to sort out a week to work at my cousin, where he worked. It wasn't his business, but he was a designer at this small graphic design firm. And they gave me a week, a Mac, like one brief. And I sat in front of a Mac for a week. And the brief was to design a skateboarding brand. So that was when I was 16. And that was probably the first thing clicked, where I was like, wow, people actually get paid to, like, all the stuff I love, Pokemon cards, skateboarding brands, all these objects that are around me. Wow, somebody made this thing. Somebody's like built their life around doing that. And that was, I wouldn't say like foreign to me, but like I hadn't been close enough to the process of it to understand that it was a path that was remotely open to me. And that was why I was like, up to that point, I was like, oh, I better get qualified in something that has like a reasonable outlook commercially. And I did a like 2-year computer programming course, and I was like terrible at it, really. Like there was no way I would have added any value to a commercial enterprise with just that skill set. So I left that, and then I found myself working at Honda, and then just finally, a bunch of my friends went to university at that period of time, and I taken a year out. I don't need to go to university. I don't want it, blah, blah, blah. And then like a year in, I'm visiting them on the weekends. I'm like, I got to get in on this. This is, I can't be working in a factory from 18 to 21. And all my like good friends are in these bigger cities, experiencing university living and all that comes with it. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do this. So I was doing this, like, I come home from those shifts, I'd make these design, like these objects. I wish I'd be able to find them now. They're probably long gone. And then I
Like
put together
physical
a
objects,
portfolio.
or
No, just like little sketches, design sketches. I can't even remember what I was doing. Flyers, whatever was popping into my head at the time. And then I applied to university with that little collection of work and scraped in by the skin of my teeth. I was supposed to have like studied specific subjects before that, but they kind of like mercy let me in, and obviously I was paying for it. So again, that was another like illusion breaking thing for me, that I was like, yeah, this is not a high prestige university I'm going to, and I'm going to be paying them. Like, yeah, they're going to let me in. So that illusion breaks after the fact. And then did that for 3 years, came out of university, got an internship in London at a design firm. And then I had a couple friends that were going to New York. And I was like, you know what? I would love to do that. I hadn't traveled much at that point at all. And I decided to Google, I think it was 2 weeks before I left, I Googled graphic design internships New York. The first page that came up was Craigslist. You know, it's the Craigslist classified ad. I sent an email to every single one of those graphic design internships on Craigslist. I think I got one response, and it was a guy, and I'm about to answer the question, by the way, that a guy that responded had just started his own design agency or creative agency, advertising agency, whatever synonym you want to use, in the West Side, in West Chelsea in Manhattan. And he's like 25-year veteran of JWT and all these big Madison Avenue agencies that had enough, started his own thing. It's like, yeah, come and make tea for 6 weeks, and I kind of introduce you to the world of like commercial design, advertising, whatever else. And that guy, to this day, I would credit with like, one, making me understand that you could just like start a business based on an idea you have and then go and convince people to pay you to do stuff. I did not really have a concept of that beforehand, at least at that scale. Like, Honda is an interesting, it's a longer story, but like, there's this incredible thing that they do at Honda where every single person that works there wears the same uniform. So like, if somebody from like the C-suite in Japan is visiting the Honda factory, they'll walk around in the same uniform that you're wearing. Kind of a tangential point, but I guess that there's like a seed planted there where it's like, wow, there's like these values that are propagating based on how this business was set up, etc. Anyway, I worked for this guy for 2 or 3 years, and that studio was never bigger than like 5 or 6 people ever in the over that period of time. So it was like I got to see basically every functioning part of that, and I think that was a huge advantage in hindsight, because you see the like commercials of you see how much things cost, you see how much like subcontractors cost, you make the pitches, you go to like present all of those things and try and win business. So like, I think a lot of people make that argument, go work for a startup at the beginning of your career because you'll get exposed to all of this stuff. And I do think that's true in some sense, but I also have in hindsight, the fact that the person I was working for was like a veteran of an industry that he was trying to disrupt or like work at from a different angle was a massive advantage to say, like, well, I say an advantage, it's been an advantage to me in hindsight than me going out and starting my own thing at 21 years old, right? With flailing around and not knowing what's going on.
Exactly. It compressed like, a lot more learning, a lot more experience into like fewer amount of time. Versus this, if you could have done 10 years with underneath somebody else and not learned nearly as much,
Yeah. And I think the guy also was Australian, which is, there's a lot of shared like culture, humor with the UK. We're both in the States. Like, we both have this like similar, I don't know, background story, and we had a great relationship where he would be completely like straight and transparent with me about stuff too, where whenever I get asked, like, best lesson I've ever learned at work, there was this one meeting we had that I think he would probably not remember or not think of as significant at all, but it's like stuck in my head forever, was you get a brief, hey, go away and work on this for a couple of days and come back to me and we'll set a meeting and go over what you've come up with. And I did a couple of days of work, and I remember I was walking over to the table to show it to him, and I was like, oh, by the way, this is not really ready. It's not very good. But he's like, why are you showing it to me then? Like, if you know it's not as good as you can make it, just cancel the meeting and bring it to me when it's right. And I was like, wow. Like, in hindsight, it's so stupid for that to be profound, but it was like, yeah, you're right. I'm wasting your time. Like, this is not good. I know I can do better. And I'm like making excuses before I show you the thing, which is even coloring your perception of it, right? It's not.
Yeah, exactly.
If there was a deadline involved where I couldn't have skipped the meeting, it's like, why enter it and like hedge before you even shown what you. It's just like there's so many lessons in that little, like, the amount of respect you actually have to have for somebody to tell them the truth in those situations, I think is like, it's still a lesson that I'm trying to learn now. It's like, you have to have really, really good relationship with people to be able to deliver something like that that's actually going to help them, but might make them feel bad in the short term. And I don't know, culturally, that has not been the case for a long time, that people can do that. And work cultures that promote that are seen as not ideal or not fair, or, there's no synonyms you can insert there. And there's obviously terrible there's obviously behavior you can't make excuses for, but I'm saying, like, we've lost something in the, like, your mentor or the person who is like teaching you how to function in this environment, telling you hard truths that will make you way more robust and competitive, and like honestly make you way happier in the long term. And
yeah, exactly.
that was so long-winded answer, but that was definitely the catalyst for me being like, oh, this person has a point of view and they're gonna act on it and make this thing that represents what they care about, and try and use that to be in, like, operate as independently as they can.
Yeah, one of my first bosses when I first started working into social media, she was really tough. And she was like known within the organization of being super tough, being very blunt, telling it exactly how it is. If it's crap, she would say it's crap. Like, not really sugarcoating things. And I remember when I first started working under her, I was like, holy shit. Like, I would be shitting it every single time. I would like sending copy over to her. Like, oh my gosh, she's gonna, like, I would send, for social media, you have to like write copy for blog posts or the things that you're promoting. So I would send like 5 different options just in case she didn't like one. And I would like frame things like, this one is great because of this. This one is great because of this. I'll spend hours writing literally 5 lines of copy. Like stay up super late and then wake up the next morning, 8 a.m., send it over via like chat, only to get like an instant reply of like, all of these are bad. This is bad because of this. This is bad because of this. None of this is good. Go back and, focus on this one single point. But like after 2 years of going through basically like, I don't know, like the Navy SEALs for social media. That's the way I see it. It's like now every single time I write something, even if it's like just for myself and I'm like, shooting the shit, not really taking it too seriously. Like I have that in the back of my brain, just like, hey, is this the best possible thing you can do? Even if it's like not super serious, like how can you optimize it for the audience? How can you, use language that's going to like move people versus just like throwing crap at the wall, So I think everybody needs somebody like that early on in their life, like a mentor, a boss that's really tough on them. Even in the moment, if it feels like hell, I think in the long term, it just makes you sharper and makes you better at what you do.
No doubt.
At one point, did you feel like things started turning around for you? Because at this point, you're, super early on in your career. You're still grinding at the design agency, but how did things progress? When did you start building like your online presence? Because that's kind of when I started learning about you.
Oh, this was years later. So I was working for this guy from 2011 to 2013 or something. So like really early in my career. And then he actually took a big job at a like massive financial institution. I was like, I went in-house to work for a client of ours at the time, which was like that to this day is probably the worst job I've ever had. It was just like, but I had to do it for a visa, stay in the States, like transfer the visa to a new employer. terrible job, but like again, great character building. And then I moved around like 7 or 8 agency jobs after that. So I'd go from
Wow.
started at this little boutique studio, moved in house to one of their clients. Then I went to a big like uh global agency with like 13,000 employees, totally different environment. Like and I think stayed there 2 or 3 years and just bounced around all different places. I think I did probably, yeah, it must have been 7 or 8 different jobs, places I worked in. The same kind of context was like started a graphic designer, art director, senior art director, creative director, like just moving like with every job change as people do, like move closer and closer to like the concept of agency in those environments. And then the last place I worked for somebody was like a medium-sized agency, couple hundred people, like really nice body of work, like, and you kind of move around thinking, oh, the thing that frustrated me about this old place is going to be different in this new place, and it's like
You find something else.
cliche, but it absolutely is not the case. It's like the dynamic is really baked into like the business model of these places, and that's like if that's not something that you're interested in working on long term, it's really like
Is it mostly because like, as a,
time to figure it out.
like as a designer, you're providing a service, and sometimes you kind of feel like you get the short end of the stick because you provide the service, they kind of treat you like crap. They're like, hey, fix this, fix that. You're like, dude, I just spent so much time and energy trying to do this for you, and you're not even like being grateful. Is that kind of the reason why, or
I think it's some of that. I think more of it is like it's just ineffective and stupid. Like so much of the work is just pointless. Like that's really what got me. Like I really didn't have that much of an issue with like you could be as curt or as I felt like so much energy was just being wasted. Like you're being asked to do something that was ill-defined. Like what's the business objective of this engagement, right? So you'd have this internal middle management team of this big client talking to this agency team, and you've like misdiagnosed the problem completely, and people don't have enough agency on the client side to implement anything actually good or interesting. And this is like my situation I'm talking about. Maybe there are agencies out there that have way more of a creative remit, but that was not the case in most of the places I worked, where the stuff you're working on just doesn't feel consequential. It doesn't feel like you're making any like, and I'm not even talking about like make the world a better place, quote unquote, any of that. Like you're not even pushing forward the business objective that you're assigned to push forward, because there's so many layers of management and so much aversion to risk taking. Like, oh, we can't say that. There's 9,000 legal reviews on the like copy of a tweet. It's like, guys, I'm not going to do this for 40 years. Like that is not interesting to me. And I think some people really thrive in that environment, and there is more power to you if you enjoy that. Like there's some incredible pros to working in that, but like the green Amex travel around, I basically went to every state in America, stayed in nice hotels, met with all like interesting people, worked on interesting problems. But that was, I think the crux of it is like, this is just, I'm too far away from the problem here. And I'm like, it's so frustrating to just experience this dynamic over and over again.
what was your like mindset going through all these years? You're just like hopping around from job to job. You're kind of moving up the ranks, but like, what's your end goal at this point in time? You're like, I want to be an art director at the biggest, creative agency, or like,
you have these like moving targets. I think I did have that. It was like the title was like the first thing. You're like, oh, when I get this title, I'll feel good. And then you get
or this amount of money or whatever.
Yeah. And then like you get like, you're living in New York, and you, there's like a true ceiling on that stuff too. Like even if you are the best of the best of the best of a commercial creative director in an agency, there's only so much economic upside that they can even justify paying you. Like, I always ask people, like, just pay me on performance then. Don't pay me a salary. Like, pay me like a salesperson. If I go out and win this amount of business with my idea, my design work, my pitch, just give me a cut of the, like,
Smart.
the first job. Nobody wants to do that. because like that is not, for the most part, not a mechanic that the majority of people in my position wanted to accept. Again, fair enough. But if you're a salesperson, you only work on that. You only work on that structure, right? So, yeah, I eventually got to the point where I worked maybe like 100 hours a week on this crazy pitch for one of these agencies I was working at the end of my career. And it's probably like a, $3-4 million contract or something. And my salary was many, many, many multiples below that, obviously.
What were you making?
And I recognized, what's that?
What were you making at the time?
I think it's probably like 90K or something. So it's like a healthy, this is a reasonable amount of time ago. It's a healthy amount of money. I'm like, literally gave up my whole personal life for months on end to win this thing. And then like win the contract. And it's like, thanks, man. Here's the next one. I'm like, you know what? This is insane. What am I doing here? Like I could go and work as a freelancer, walk in and out of jobs in like, once you have a little bit of a network in that kind of, you're a hired gun with a skill set that translates to all these different business cases. So I was like, all right, I'm out. I started freelance for a little bit. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to do my own thing. I don't want to derail your questions, by the way. This is like,
no, this is good. This is the majority of what I want to cover is like,
okay, great. So it comes from like going out and freelancing, like through a network of old contacts that if you've worked agency jobs in New York, you have probably, I don't know if this is the case now, but if you have like a decent reputation, you can get work. Go in, work on a pitch for 5 days.
Probably make more money too, right? Because you're on a contract basis. Yeah,
definitely. And there's horrific amount of waste in that, like horrific. The amount of money they'll pay you an hour to like work on a pitch for something, because, it's just a game of like, there's a numbers game, like throw back as many responses as you can to win the work.
Yeah.
And it's not like, it's kind of fun because you work with different people all the time, but you're always going to a different place. And
yeah,
so I was doing that. I was actually doing like, I had a friend at an old agency that referred me. So he got a request from this brand, that one of my favorite brands in the world, automotive brand. And he got this request. It was like, okay, these guys are asking for this really simple thing. It's like 5 emails and a landing page or something. And we're going to quote them such a horrific amount of money. They're definitely going to say no. So when they say no, can I forward you as a alternative? I was like,
you could do the work for a cheaper price or whatever.
Yeah. And you can pitch them, and he's like, you're going to have to present yourself as like not Jack. You're going to have to like make a agency company of some, yeah. So I was like, all right, sounds good. One afternoon, I'm like, LegalZoom, Squarespace, get the like front end set up. And then I was like moonlighting doing the 2 of those things, right? So I was like working these day jobs, taking conference calls with this company, pretending I was like operating this 20-person company in like lower Manhattan, but it was like me in my pajamas out of my
your living room
apartment. Yeah. And that went on for a little while, and then they eventually asked me to pitch on this like big job. I was like, all right, if I get this, then that's like a full, that kind of gives permission to fully commit to doing my own thing. No more freelancing, no more like, and won that job. That was great. And kind of started working for them almost as an agency of records. I would have recurring work from them, decent amount of money. And trying again to like, going back to the start of my career, became that guy that employed me to begin with, right? It's like you have this company that has these expectations that have been set by these massive companies that can just absorb so much inefficiency, schedule 5 conference calls every day, planning meetings, this and that. It's not just like, hey, come up with something interesting and give it back to us. Here's what we're trying to do. It's like
planning meetings,
millions of touching points. Exactly.
Yeah.
So after about 9 months of that, I'm like, I can't do this anymore, and this is insane. I'm just becoming the thing that I hated the most. I'm like, if I don't employ project manager, strategy person, freelancer, scaling up and down for this, get my insurance. Crazy. So I was like, all right, I'm not interested enough in this to build a formal structure around it. So as soon as I got to the point where I couldn't really fulfill it myself, just took a step back from that. And that's probably when I started doing the internet stuff way more seriously. Because up until that point, I'd been relying on my personal network almost exclusively to get work. Nothing was coming from outside. But I had, I built the Instagram, I built the website where I post these projects that I worked on. It's just like nobody cares. Like there's not there's actually
They're like value added, for them.
Yeah, it's like so out of context. It's so, like, I think this is probably true in every industry. There's like this little corner of the internet that exists for people who do the same thing as you to appreciate it, but they're never going to hire you, right? It's like designers posting stuff for designers.
Yeah, like
Ripple is a good example of that. Very cool service and a great community of people, but it's like, I'm not going to win work here, People who are trying to find designers aren't, maybe creative directors who are trying to hire designers are going through Dribble, but clients that want to hire somebody independently, very rarely they go in direct. And there's probably stories that contradict that, but as a general rule. And so I do that for a while, and I'm like, this is, I just have to keep going back to my personal network. I get these like referrals, like, oh, can you make this recruiting website? Can you do this video series for this time of thing? And I was like, reasonably competent across all of that stuff. Like I could do a decent job, but I wasn't great, like best in the world at any of that by any means, anywhere close. And I don't think even anything I did in my career, but up to that point, I was the best in the world at. It was like, you just kind of a generalist to the point where you just cost less to the business than you're providing back. I was definitely that. Like, I'm in there doing 100 hours a week, and people probably just like, what is this guy doing, man? Why do you keep showing up?
Yeah.
Because I guess I like underestimated what the eventual return was for me, but all the experience was the return. And the thing that I realized after like doing all these different weird, or like relying on my network for all of these like one-off things, there was like a little pattern started to emerge, which was this process of talking to people and trying to simplify what they were saying, thinking, selling into these just sequence of what were at that point PowerPoint slides, right? Or keynote slides was my weapon of choice. And I would sit in a room with somebody for half a day, ask them about their whole the whole story, like how the business gets started, what are the best examples of you doing the work that you love to do, and try and turn that into this like really compact visual narrative. And that was like really one of the only times, or this kind of autocomplete went back to some of the old agency days where I'd be in a room pitching something and people are like, yeah, that's exactly what we mean, or that's exactly what we've been trying to say, but we haven't been able to say it. That like a moment of epiphany was then retroactively like, wow, what if I could just do that? Like, what if I could just, and the first iteration of that was like, I'm just going to do pitch decks now. Like, I don't make videos. I don't make websites. I'm not like going to do social media strategy. I will do,
it's like product type.
Whatever story you want to tell, I will put this into like a 10-slide keynote presentation. You could put it wherever you want, use it wherever you want. It could be an internal tool. It could be a fundraising tool. It could be whatever. But that's the only thing I do. And this is like when I started putting structure around it too, where it's like, it takes this long. You have to sit with me for this amount of time. You can expect the first iteration this far out from our first conversation. Then there's this many changes, and that's it. And then if you want to like do something else, that's a whole different conversation. It's not this like swirling, completely
like worth meeting,
abstract, spaghetti object that I was in before. So that was like the first real iteration of it. And then like getting more serious about like internet native marketing, I think. Like I've been in all these digital agencies that are probably 5-10 years behind what people like solo or really small teams on the internet are doing. And I just kind of fell into that world first with the like real direct marketing, internet marketing stuff, which is like way less glamorous than, the Fortune 500 advertising world. It's like, how do you get somebody to click this button?
Yeah.
And then after that, the sequence with that was like discovering the Naval Ravikants of the world, the like Silicon Valley, the technology, like this narrative that had eluded me for such a long time. Even though I'd worked kind of in software businesses and like had a little bit of a stint at that's like what I would call a technology startup, it never really clicked for me in the same way. And then there's that tweet thread that he wrote, How to Get Rich Without Getting Lucky, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Classic. Yeah.
Yeah. And that like articulated a lot of ideas that I'd like felt like viscerally kind of knew were true, but I hadn't like read anybody like succinctly explain them back to me. And that was like the same feeling that I was like, wow, this is actually in contrast to what I've been doing for the last 10 years, this stuff actually like makes logical sense to me. Like I could look at that statement and be like, yes, it might be incredibly difficult to accomplish that, but the logic is so sound. I'm not debating it, right? And I've experienced the opposite side of it, the frustrating side of it, which made it feel even more true. And then that was, again, I credit his writing and those tweets specifically for like giving me there was definitely like this inflection point in the stuff I was putting on the internet that was around that time when I was reading that stuff and discovering those ideas. And a lot of it was like me trying to become a more competent entrepreneur, understand like what I was doing and how to make it better. And I would then take those ideas and use the same system that I was using in these like pitch deck meetings. Be like, how do I take that idea and make it more accessible to a greater number of people? Add this visual context to it. And yeah, just
And this entire time you were posting those online too, like after you get permission from the client?
Probably 2019. I think it was January 2019. I really started seriously doing Visualize Value, like under that name, and like digging for information and ideas that would like complement that style. And then I would just 6-7 times a day would make one and post it on Instagram. And then Twitter was a huge, there was another big inflection point because people who wrote those things or said them originally were mostly on Twitter, like Naval, Nassim Taleb, Seth Godin. There's like a bunch of people who I credited with these ideas and added this context to that would amplify them. And that in turn, attracted a bunch of people who were already interested in consuming those ideas to the network of people that were following the work. I just did that for years and years and years and like made all these artifacts as a like product of working on that. So I went from the service business to like built a couple of curriculums, one about design. And like when the service business got to the point where I couldn't fulfill the demand one-on-one, I was like, I could train people to do this and like scale this into the agency business again. But I'd already had the experience where I was like, I never want to do that ever again. So I decided to go the product route and probably spent 2 solid years. That was during COVID too, which was like, the timing was just impeccable for that because people are at home on the computer. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
Oh, this like learn a skill set. And yeah, then that was 2 years or so of focus specifically on this, like.
And those did really well, right? Like just like raw numbers.
They did great.
How did they do, and why did you kind of stop? Did you feel like it was kind of declining in terms of like it's not sustainable, or?
No, I think they did great. Like many multiples of what I was earning in the agency world, and I think over time I just realized like there's more. They're all $1 now, so they're all the list. At one point, they were $300 each, and I'm incredibly. I think they could still could be. It's just like as a focus, is something that is not taking up a ton of my time anymore. It's like writing these curriculums. I actually find it super difficult now because of how fast things are going.
Yeah,
They're like, I almost want to pare those back to they're like, these are not, and they were conceived this way too. Like these aren't specific technical recommendations, right? These aren't like, here's exactly what you should do. Here's the tactics. They're all like, here are these principles that should transcend. Yeah, they should transcend like whatever industry you're in or whatever medium you're working in. These are things that are like similar to the lessons that I'd learned along my career where you're like, okay, that is the voice in the back of my head that I'm not forgetting every time I go to work on something. And that stuff is all still true. It's just, there's also post-COVID, the internet, I got interested in different things too. So I like keep that stuff up and people still cycle through it and hopefully still get a ton of value from it. But my personal focus like became about the artwork itself and the artifacts themselves, which was unlocked by like falling into the crypto rabbit hole probably late 2020, early 2021.
Yeah. And so late 2020, early 2021 to now, how has that, evolution been over the last couple of years? Because I know it's NFTs and you're doing a bunch of different things now.
Yeah. So the community that had built up around the education stuff and the feeds on Instagram and Twitter of Visualize Value, there's like a few thousand people in a Discord that had consumed all this stuff. And a few people reached out to me late 2020. They're like, oh, I'd love to collect Visualize Value work. I'm like, oh, you know what? I tried making these physical prints. It's a pain in the ass getting like white ink on black paper. And I went to this art fair in Queens, got invited to exhibit, which I thought was this like, exclusive, legitimate thing. But it's really just if you sell 50 tickets, we'll let you set up in a corner of this warehouse, right? And I did that. I spent a ton of money producing these posters
as a prints.
And I was sitting in this warehouse, and people like randomly walked in, and they would like kind of look at what you're doing and then walk past you. Maybe if like 1 in 100 people would be curious what it is. And it just struck me in that moment. I was like, this is so idiotic. Like there's 100,000 people on the internet that are following this stuff, that are interested in it. And I'm like here in this random location in the quote unquote real world.
Yeah.
And it's also just like they lack the context and they haven't opted into the story.
Yeah.
To the point where I'm like, what am I even doing here? This makes no sense. Like everybody that is interested in this, that's like a part of this network, is online and has signaled that they want to stay online, and there's no like. So that was one realization. And then the same person that wanted to collect the work was like, no, I mean, you should make these into NFTs. I was like, what is this? Send me a link. I don't know how familiar you are with all this stuff, but
yeah,
at the time there's marketplace, OpenSea, you know this. Like, he sent me a link to OpenSea. I click on the link. I go there. I'm like, this is mad. What is this? It looks like the eBay or something. I'm like, I'm not putting my work on this. And I think at the time you probably couldn't have put your work on there. Like it was like
a little more restrictive. Yeah,
all this stuff. Yeah. And then somebody a couple months later sent me an invite to this platform called Foundation, which is just beautifully designed products, like digitally first auction house, gallery, referral only, beautifully curated. There's artists on there that like I've been following for 10 years on Instagram. This is right after Beeple sold a piece for $69 million at Christie's a month or two before. So it's like it was becoming legitimized. And then there's this I guess this notion of like, wow, the thing that I've struggled with all this time is I make these objects, these things that I really care about, the things that I spend 10 hours a day working on, to get somebody to do something else, So I'm like, I'm making this thing, and then it's like, come and hire me to be your graphic designer, or by this curriculum. Nothing wrong with that, but the idea that the value exists in the object itself versus it just being like a marketing thing,
Yeah.
is something that totally it completely flipped my perspective on it. And I just basically applied the same principles. So I'd make these pieces that were like exploring the underlying principles of Ethereum and owning digital objects and like all of these like massive paradigm shifts in the same way that I would do that with visualized value for, these ideas, like broader ideas about technology. I would do it specifically about
Crypto.
the underlying principles of a digital economy with like different mechanics than the one that we're currently involved in, right?
Yeah.
So that was like the first year or so I did that, and then just started experimenting with bigger and bigger networks. So would publish these open editions, 10,000 pieces, 16,000 pieces. There's like a ton of context to go into them individually, but they all explore these same ideas of like digital ownership, like who gets to decide what is interesting, what isn't, what has value, what doesn't. It's all like meditating on all the stuff I experienced throughout my career, but it's grown this network of people that either think similarly or interested in some of the underlying concepts that kind of fit all this stuff together. And that's been it's been mega rewarding and crazy and different than the work I was doing before. Because there's been we sold some smaller collections, bigger collections, like played around with different ideas in the physical world now. So I've collaborated with a few people that are like hyper notable physical artists and printmakers, and it's fun, man. It's just like visualized value started as this it is still a super focused idea, I think, but it's like kind of grown from its single visual constraint into like the thing that underpins all of it is hopefully it's like these epiphanies or these like objects that challenge your perception of something, and that's the underlying criteria of all the things that come out of it. And by no means is there like a limit to what that is or will be. But it's fun to have like transcended the like very obvious constraint, but it's still super constrained. It's still like it has to pass all of these tests to be like anything that adds to that universe has to be complementary to everything that came before it. So it's now way harder to define what I'm doing than it was 2-3 years ago,
And it's the cool thing is like it seems like you're really enjoying the work that you do, and I feel like you can't really get to this point without going through that shitty part of the beginning of your career, because you wouldn't have maybe appreciated as much or like understood the true value of ownership or like scale, or just doing all the repetitive work over and over and over again. Whereas like now you're doing truly creative work where you have online community people that are also like helping amplify and do all this stuff that you didn't have in other past jobs that you had. What does like the next evolution look like for you? Do you have any fun things that you're planning or obsessions that you're kind of following?
Yeah, there's this is maybe just downstream of Twitter algorithm, like telling me what to care about. But I'm like, if you're still plugged into the technosphere, it's like all of these like narratives of AI, robotics, quantum computing, crypto, like it feels to me like that's, whether or not I'm choosing that or it's choosing me, I'm like, that's the stuff that I'm trying to document or the stuff that fascinates me. So a couple of the most recent collections were like these custom trained AI models. I just did an exhibition in Paris in November around like the evolution of photography. So these image models that can produce photoreal outputs that obviously don't involve a camera have these incredible parallels to how painters reacted to the invention of photography. So the idea that like photography is cheating, photography is not an art form, like you're you're destroying people's jobs and careers and ability to create things and self-worth and all that stuff. It's just cataloging these advancements and these like parallels in culture and history is the main focus. It's just like I can't even keep up with it myself, you know? Like
So
one of the bigger visualized value collections is called Checks, and it's marking that moment in time where X was acquired by Elon, and this entire system of verification was basically upended, right? And the check mark became this thing that was assigned by a conference room in San Francisco to like, you have $8, you get a check mark.
Yeah.
And the implications of that are so profound, and we're like experiencing them right now. Maybe like every day that passes, like those implications get more and more obvious and bigger. And it's funny that the initial intent of visualized value was like, here's the idea, here it's being delivered, like this is how you should interpret it, and this is the message. And that's gotten broader to the point where it's like you almost can't capture all of that, but if you can create something that like gets people to ask those questions and like continually reflect on it, it feels like an evolution of that first thing. It's hard to describe exactly what the process is to get there, but that I think feels more accurate as like responding to and trying to capture these evolutions in technology and culture in real time on the internet, which is like the medium where culture happens. That's like a controversial statement for some reason. Incredible to me that people can make that statement, because you know, even the idea of somewhere where you spend all of your time, you know, we have this very well agreed upon system of ownership in the physical world, you know, where it's like you try to own your home, own things, or try to like exactly, maintain them, and you'll spend the vast majority of your waking life on this platform where you own nothing, and you like you're not. And I think even we're seeing like the X payout thing, I think is way bigger than many, like it's brushed off as like, oh, it's kind of a cool little gimmick. But to me, it's so massive in terms of like the transition and the speed at which culture is changing, and that will actually become a profession. You know, it already is, right? It already was this niche thing where you're like, optimizing to get people to see what I'm doing on the internet. But now the feedback loop is so direct. It's very similar to the idea of like minting your artwork as these ownable objects. It's like a way more centralized version of it, obviously, but like that is valuable. Like making stuff that entertains people, that people want to consume and like go out of their way to find, is a valuable thing. And we're like, you know, you like sleepwalk into it. It like becomes a reality without you even acknowledging it. And that's like, the internet is such a powerful and underestimated thing. Like that's mostly my focus is like, I was able to completely change my life and circumstances and like the quality of the interactions I have. The internet's the only thing that made that happen for me. You know, it was like completely changed the trajectory of my life. So most of the stuff is just continuing to explore that. And it's not hyper strategic in that like it changes so quickly. You just listen and react when the reaction is obvious.
Yeah. I've been working on a thesis for a few years now that basically states building an online presence is one of the highest leverage things you can do with your time. And I think your story is one of, if not the best case study for it, because yes, I think I agree with your statement of like the internet itself can be like one of the most valuable tools. But if you just reflect on your journey today, like as we were talking, if you didn't ever publish stuff online or like put yourself out there, then you wouldn't have gotten nearly 10% of the returns that you got now. And it doesn't have to be like monetary returns, just like returns on your time, returns on your freedom, returns on the control, returns on like the happiness of what you do today.
And the quality of the relationships you have that's exactly. Like geographically bound too is incredible.
Yeah. And I think as AI, you know, makes uh, software, creative work, everything just, is so much more commoditized. I think the one thing or the two things that I have in my thesis is like brand and distribution. So like people knowing who you are and liking you or disliking you and being able to like reach people and being good at generating attention. And I think those two things are going to be super, super valuable. And if you're, curious and know how to ask good questions, then these AI models will be able to provide anything that you want. So then it's just a matter of like, okay, well, if you want to build something, how do you get people to use it? How do you get people to care? And I think that's just going to be more and more scarce and valuable over time.
Agreed, man. Yeah, that's a good thesis. I would love to read it when you finish it.
Yeah, it'll be live soon. A few more questions. I know we're wrapping up on time. I'm just kind of curious, like, what do you do in your free time? Like, do you have any fun hobbies or obsessions? You seem like a really busy guy that likes to work. But yeah, any interesting
Family time, man. Just hang out with the family. I like driving. That's really the only.
You drive a stick shift
Nah,
or
unfortunately
manual?
not. I need one, but paddle shift.
Oh, that's cool.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, and yeah, I got young kids, man. So it's just spend as
It takes
much
up a lot of
time as
time.
I possibly can. Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, luckily you're in a role in a position now where you can kind of control more of your time and energy versus before. Imagine early in your career having kids, that would be a lot more difficult because you're just kind of slaving away,
Yeah. Yeah. It's you can design your time. I'm definitely that's very fortunate arrangement.
Yeah,
Like it goes so quick, man, as everybody will tell you.
for sure. Last two questions. So if you had to like think back to the beginning of your design career, let's start there. If there's one, piece of advice or resource or anything that you can tell your younger self at that point in time that would have like sped up the process, or maybe just made it less painful for you. Anything you would share, or because I imagine there's some people listening to this that maybe they're in a job that they hate, but they know that they like want more, or they think they can do more. They just don't know what direction to go or how to take it or what to do, what action to take.
Yeah, I think we've spoken about most of it. To condense it is like just start producing things that show what you care about, like create this network, regardless of whether or not you're getting the feedbacks. Like you can distill how you think and your taste into these objects that exist beyond you. And there's a meta story here. I got to illustrate the book, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant, and there is a quote in that book. Somebody tweeted it the other day. I have to dig it up and I'll send it to you. But that summarizes this entire idea, which is like you apply for a job that doesn't exist by making things that are like only you can make. And it sounds like ridiculous, and when you start, it's like, what am I doing? This like doesn't make sense. And you have to like, I wrote this curriculum 2 or 3 years ago called The Permissionless Apprentice. I would also recommend that as like, go read that and just do things that people can see on the internet that are reflective of how you think. Like in the design community, there's a really obvious way to do this, and I like accidentally learned this. Like redesign something that already exists. Like what would you do to improve this product? What would you do to like reimagine this system and produce these artifacts, that display that would be the crux of it, I think, and just get into like momentum with doing that, where like it is so true that like momentum gives you momentum, and like when you don't have it, it's like pushing the boulder again
the other way.
and it's like if you can just keep like even like the minimum viable contribution to your own network, whether that's like sending a tweet every day, writing a blog post, recording a short video, a design exercise. I did this thing called Daily UI early in my career, which sends you an email every day with a design brief. To do it every day for 100 days, I guarantee you'll be 10 times more. You have 10 times more momentum when you finish that, and you can apply that elsewhere.
Nice. Is there anything that I can help with, or people listening? Anything that you're looking for help with, or a project that you're working on, or anything like that? I'm a big believer in like putting things out there, or like goals, or
Yeah, I
uh,
appreciate that.
whatever you need help. So you never know who's listening.
Uh, no, I mean the thing that I'm trying to solve for right now is like all of the stuff I've been doing the last 2 or 3 years is so esoteric compared to what came before. So go and look at that and just tell me what you don't understand, and it will help me explain it better.
Dope. Well, thank you, Jack. I appreciate you making the time today. This is awesome.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate it.